So we've just talked about reading files, and now we're going to talk about writing them. So by default, our program is going to print our output to standard out. We've talked a little bit about that. It's the standard, the normal place for output to occur when you say print in your program. And we've seen that. We can go into Python 3, and I can say print hello. And if it prints right now just in the REPL, but if I were to put that inside of a program and run the program, it would appear on the command line exactly where I run the program. Instead, I would like to be able to print. I would like to put this text into a file. I can actually use print, or I can use a file handle to write this. So we've already talked about file handles. We did fh open, for instance. We could open the solution1 .py, and we could fh read that, and you'll see it just spits it all out as text. And we see that the new lines just show up here as \n, and it doesn't actually print out. If I wanted, if I were to say print, it would actually, sorry, I need to open it again, right? And then I could say open print. And when I print it, then those new lines are interpreted as actual new lines. So we saw how that's how we open, but that's open for reading. And we also saw that we can get into trouble if, for instance, we say we try to open a file that doesn't exist, like blarg. We saw that that created an exception, a file not found error. So we don't want that. So if you're trying to open a file for reading, you need to make sure the file exists. So silently, what's going on when we say open, like let's go back to open as solution1, it's opening in a mode for reading. That's the default way to open it. So there's a second optional argument here to open, and by default, it's R, to read. And that's why you can't read a file that doesn't exist. It has to exist. So we just open that file for reading, and now we could read it if we want. If I were to open it, though, if I want to open a new file for writing, I would change the R to a W. And if I were to run this code right now, it would actually overwrite. It would zero out the solution1.py, because as soon as you open a file for writing, whether it exists or not, well, if it doesn't exist, it's created. If it does exist, then a new file is created with that name, which means that you lose the old data. So let's call it here test. And now I've opened a file called test for writing. And now I can use the fh write method to say hello. And I'll just write hello. Now, one of the things that we've seen is every time we call print, it automatically puts a new line on the end. And we played around with using the end equals the empty string in a previous exercise to not have it print that. So write is the opposite. Write will never put a new line unless you tell it. So if I want there to be a new line, I have to type that \n, which is the meta character that says, interpret this as a new line when you see it. But to put it in, I'm literally typing a \, and then the letter N. There's no special like control V, M kind of a stuff. And then I put terminate the string, and that is what will be written to the file called test. Now, this returns 6, which is the number of bytes that it wrote, HEL, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It wrote 6 bytes of data into the file handle. There's another part of this mode that when I opened it for writing, you can also tell it what kind of data you're putting into it. So it's either text or bytes, binary data. And so by default, you open a file for reading in text mode. And here we opened it for writing, and it just by default used text. But if you want to be completely accurate, you would say open WT, and then we could write that. And if you want to write binary data, you would open it for WB. There's one additional way that you could open a file, and that is for appending. So if the file exists, then you will start adding text, or you will start adding content at the end of the file. instead of overwriting a file that already exists. So 3 different ways that you can open the file for writing with 2 different kinds of content, and you can mix and match them however you like. So we've seen that when you call write, it's going to show you the number of bytes that were written. Normally we don't pay attention to that. It's not like we make sure that the number of bytes that was written equals the length of the string. In pretty much every code that I've written or read, you just simply call fh write and it works. If it doesn't work, then it'd be something like maybe your disk is full and you can no longer write data to your hard drive. In which case you have much bigger problems than checking that the right number of bytes was written. Another way that that you could use this would be to use the print method. So for instance, I could say print, and it doesn't matter if you use single or double quotes here, hello again. And I can exclamation point. And I can tell it that the file to write is fh. So file needs to be an open file handle. And so I'm printing that. Oh, and I just made a mistake. Print already adds a new line, so I didn't need to have that new line there. I can actually verify that if I go back and do it again. Hello yet again. Then there's going to actually be hello new line, hello again, new line, and then hello again. So let us now, we'd like to inspect that file. I need to close the file handle before I'm done with it. And I can do that with fh.close. And now the file handle has been closed. If I want, I can open test, and I can read it. Remember, opening, when I open, the default mode is to read it. And I know it exists because I just wrote it. And I can read the input. And there it is, hello, new line, hello again, new line, because I put a new line here, and then print also put its own new line. And then I said hello yet again, and there's hello yet again. If I were to print that, then the new lines would be interpreted as new lines, and we would see them with actual new lines in the output. So one last thing here, I was showing you that if we were to run this 2 times, so I am what I am and I'm not ashamed, something that Hagrid says in Harry Potter, I can also pass as to file just open. So I can shorten all this up and put the open command right there as the argument to file. If I were to print that again, if I run that twice, how many times will I see that line in the file called Hagrid? Well, let's find out. Let's open that file and read it. And we see it only occurred once. Can you think about why that is? It's because each time the print was called, we opened the file handle anew. And each time we opened it with write text. And the write would overwrite any existing data that was in there. So it's very important that you understand that when you open a file for writing, anything that existed there already is immediately gone the moment you say open. So don't do that. If you are worried about overwriting existing data, I've shown you how you can use os.path.isFile to see if a file already exists. There are also other methods that you could use to see, like if the file exists and its size is greater than 0, because maybe it exists, but no data was ever written there, and so therefore it's safe to overwrite it. But if it's crucial that you not overwrite existing data, then it's up to your program to verify that the file exists and then not overwrite it. So that's a little bit about writing files. Next, we're going to get into, hopefully you understand reading and writing files enough so that we can talk about how we're going to incorporate that into our program.